Emily, what are these called here? What is this?
These are core terraces, sand-filled terraces that have been used over a period of time out here on the bank. At one point in time, they were permitted using jute material, previously core material, which just has a different lifespan in the sun, biodegradability.
And these are approved?
Yes, these have been permitted for a number of years now.
And are they working?
In our opinion, they have been working. I think everybody agrees that to a certain extent they are a very successful means of protecting the bank, the toe of the bank, from erosion. And one of the things that we over time have come to really like about this as a solution out here is that it is a softer solution. And so when nourishment material that's placed on top of these bags is washed away, there's something softer for the waves to impact and tear out if need be, as opposed to running up against a harder structure.
Yeah, they're very expensive to maintain.
They need to be maintained on a pretty consistent basis.
All right, so now you work for the Land Council.
I do.
Who funds the Land Council?
The Land Council is all privately donor funded.
Okay.
We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
All right. So with that in mind, you've been going to all the CONCOM meetings. You represent?
I essentially represent the public. I represent our membership base.
Okay.
For the Land Council.
Okay. And tell me what the Land Council's position on this is, the hard armoring of this bluff.
The Land Council is not in favor of the revetment that's being proposed out on the SconsitBluff, primarily because of its hard nature and because of what has been seen from revetments around the state and around the country. Also because of specific conditions out here in this environment, we feel that it's not an appropriate solution and that there will be a lot of negative impacts to the surrounding areas.
Okay, and what kind of impacts are we talking specifically about?
Well, specifically speaking to the adjacent resource areas that the Conservation Commission protects under their regulations and the State Wetlands Protection Act, the coastal beach, the adjacent coastal banks, and also downdrift areas are what we're most concerned about. And the specific impacts would be the loss of the beach, the narrowing and eventual disappearance of the beach in front of the revetment because of accelerated erosion and caused from the hard structure, and also the loss of sediment from the bank, which would naturally be eroding out. And also similarly at the terminal ends of the structure, we're concerned about terminal end scour and accelerated erosion there, which we've seen around the island at places like Gene Ratner's down on Sheep Pond Road previously. And then, even more importantly, I think the downdrift areas that would typically be nourished by this coastal bank, and the impacts that might be seen from a structure such as is being proposed are really hard to estimate. This coastal bank, as you can imagine, loses an astonishing amount of sediment every year, which obviously puts a lot of pressure on those living on top of it, but it also means that it's an incredible resource for the beaches around the rest of the island. And so we're really concerned about those impacts that are going to be harder to monitor and calculate farther away from the project location.
So in your understanding, how big would this thing be? I mean, if they put a hard armored toe in here, would it be the same size as what we're looking at with these jute bags?
Well, one of the things that's going to depend on is the slope of the existing bank. I think they have just submitted some additional information on existing conditions out here, which will help to show everyone how much of the slope needs to be built out before the revetment can actually be placed in a stable manner on the bank. And once that happens, I think they're proposing sort of a veneer of smaller rocks followed by a couple of layers of, pretty large boulders.
So, if I'm to understand this correctly, they said there would be access, but you would be walking on top of the rocks. Is that kind of what would happen?
That's my understanding.
Like a big jetty, sort of.
That's my understanding.
And if that were to happen, this beach would be gone, in your opinion? Would we lose all of this beach?
So a lot of that and the rate at which the beach would disappear would depend on the mitigation nourishment that is proposed and that is added on front of the revetment. Because by adding sand in place of what would naturally be lost, you can slow down and minimize the loss of beach in front of the revetment, and also help to avoid those impacts to downdrift areas.
That would be probably pretty expensive, wouldn't it, to continue to build? Because I've seen what's happened in photographs to other places that have hard-towed their area, and what was a beach is gone. I mean, it's just rock.
And I think that depending on the situation, some revetment installations go hand in hand with a nourishment program, some do not. So again, the rate at which a beach disappears or is lost depends a lot on how much sand is put back into the system. But yes, that is definitely going to accelerate and become an issue.
Is there any other ideas or things that you could suggest outside of doing this that people can look forward to up on the bluff? Is there anything that they can try outside of a hard armored tow that might save them having to move their homes? Or
well, you know, I think that this has been a solution that has been successful. I think that the state and the Department of Coastal Zone Management have sort of been exploring some other options that potentially could slow the tow erosion down here. I personally am not really sure what can be done to permanently solve this erosion problem. Again, the massive size of this bank, I think that revetments maybe have their place in coastal management, but I just don't think that those kinds of hard structures are going to do the larger Nantucket community any favors in this location.
What about this? Recently I just heard that the scientific community went from 90% in agreement that global warming is happening to 95% agreement that global warming is happening. And we all know that if that's truly happening, then sea levels are rising. What would be so terrible about allowing folks here to try this if they spent their own money, so that we might learn from it and be able to use it if we had to in other locations? Because if that's true, we're going to have a problem.
Sure, sort of as an experiment.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the issues with applying that idea or notion to this specific project is, for one thing, its scale and its size. And I think that most engineers or experts would probably agree that when something the size of what's being proposed is put in, it's probably going to be even more expensive to remove it. And I don't know that anything this size has ever been removed, or if anyone's ever attempted to remove it. So I think, our bigger concern, in addition to, as you were saying, the long-term financing of mitigation, monitoring, whether or not that's sustainable, is just the fact that once it's in, if it doesn't do what everybody wants it to do, if it does have impacts to Quidnet Squam, to Sconsit Village, Codfish Park, we're kind of stuck with it out here, and we're going to have to deal with it somehow. And so I think that the long-term implications of making a mistake with an experiment of this size are just too great for Nantucket.
And then one other option, one other idea that was posed: what if we were to sink something out there, to slow down the force of the waves coming in? Because that's what knocks this out, right?
Right.
It's the wave action, not so much the wind.
Right.
Is that possible?
I think that those ideas are really fascinating, and I mean, this whole dynamic system is interesting. It is. They are so big.
How many ships would you have to sink?
I'm not all that familiar with the technology. Yeah. I think that what would be really important if Nantucket were to try something like that would be to 100% make sure that it could be moved. Because again, the system's so dynamic. The shoals are changing all the time on their own. If we were to create our own, and things changed around it to make a different dynamic of waves impacting the shore, we would need to make sure that we could move it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Emily.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gino.
Thanks for taking us down here.
Absolutely.